Today, we are going to do a game recap of a game called A Plague's Tale. I'll try to do my best to cover everything in the story, from lore to gameplay and anything else I can think of. The story begins, and we're in the Kingdom of France in November of the year 1348. Now, let's quickly pause to set up the world and the history leading up to this year. This time in history was very turbulent. The 100-Year War has been going on for 11 years now, and what the 100-Year War was, well, a war between the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of France. Well, I won't dive too much into the history of the war since that would justify an entire video by itself, but it was mostly due to the legitimacy of the succession of the French crown, and as well as some land disputes. Also, the Black Plague arrived in Europe 1 year before in October 1347, when 12 ships arrived at the Sicilian port of Messina. People gathered around to see the ships, and upon looking inside, most of the sailors were either dead or gravely ill, covered in black boils that oozed out blood and pus. Authorities quickly sent what they called death ships back out to sea, but the damage was already done. People had heard rumors of a deadly pestilence going across Asia, but that was only a rumor until the death ships arrived. The Black Plague had actually been circulating since the early 1340s when it engulfed China, India, Persia, Syria, and Egypt, and traveled so fast because of the trading routes, carried by fleas on the bodies or clothes of travelers, or by flea-ridden rats aboard ships crossing the sea. It's estimated that the plague moved about 24 miles a day, engulfing country to country in a matter of a few short years. The Black Plague symptoms were, of course, the boils, but alongside that was a high fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, and aches and pain. And the most terrifying part about the plague was just how contagious it was. Simply by touching clothes, or any material for that matter, being bitten by the fleas or rats, you could easily contract the plague. And this just wasn't limited to people either. It could also affect cows, sheep, goats, pigs, and chickens. The Black Plague was also efficient too, with a case fatality ratio between 30 and 60%. To put that in perspective, COVID-19, one of the largest epidemics of the modern era, had a ratio and really varies depending on where you lived. The highest was around 5.8 mortality, but for most other countries, it was around 0.8%. It said that people could feel fine one day, but upon going to sleep, they would be found dead the next morning. It's unimaginable to think of such a disease in modern times with such a high mortality rate. During that time, and it's still debated, that around 200 million people died in just the course of 5 years, with a range of either 5 to 40% of the world's population being wiped out. Also, during this time, Pope Clemens VI says that Jews are not to blame for the Black Death and that people should not kill them. And man, Jewish people have had a rough time throughout history. Continuing on, we start in a forest and we hear a man saying how Amicia is dawdling, and if she's that slow now, how will she be able to keep up with the lords on the hunt? Amicia says that they will not beat her and that the lords will be eating her dust. The man asks why we're going for a walk here, and Amicia explains that the tree is here. The man asks what tree, but she says it's the apple tree, and she wants to do the Knight's Challenge again. The man replies that she is not 10 anymore, but Amicia pleads to the man, which turns out to be her father named Robert de Rune, and he's a lord of the land. Robert, a little annoyed, agrees to Amicia's request, and they set off on the forest path. Amicia also is accompanied by her hunting dog named Leon. They continue along the path until finding a ribbon on a tree. Robert explains that the ribbon is where he won her mother over. Amicia is disappointed that her mother couldn't come with them today, but Robert explains that they have obligations to fulfill now. Him looking over the lands and her mother taking care of her sick brother. Amicia cries, saying how she never gets to see them anymore and that they're always too busy to spend any time with her. Robert has a hard time explaining, but says that they're here for her now, before running off. Amicia trails behind, and they have reached the apple tree. Robert explains that the apple tree was planted on the day Amicia was born, and she can't take the knight's challenge. Amicia asks what the rules are. Robert replies that they are simple. The apples on the tree have become corrupted by a great and Amicia must hit 6 apples before 10 seconds are up. If she succeeds, she can become a knight. Amicia accepts the challenge and finds some rocks nearby. She begins the test, and here I thought I hit 6 apples, but looking over the clip, I only hit 5. But our father doesn't seem to care too much, just saying how her sling is noisy. Leon starts barking, and Amicia says he must have found a rabbit or something. So we start to follow Leon. Robert says he'll catch up and that he's not as young as he used to be. Amicia sprints through the forest and catches up with Leon. Leon has found a wild boar. Robert catches up with them and Amicia says she can use her sling to kill the boar. Robert says that might work, but she'll need to get a lot closer. He then points out the tall grass that we can hide in. Controls are very simple, and I'm playing with an Xbox controller, so X is to crouch. When we're crouching, we can sneak around and it makes us move a lot quieter. LT is to aim our sling, and man, does it have some crazy auto aim. But we need to hold LT down for a few seconds to let Amicia wind up her sling. If we shoot too early, the rock will go flying in any other direction. Amicia starts sneaking closer to the boar and winding up her shot. Using RT, we nailed the boar in the head, but the boar doesn't go down and it runs off. Leon starts chasing the boar and Amicia falls, telling her father that they will feast like kings tonight. We lose track of Leon, but can still hear his barking. Amicia then enters a darker part of the woods and she sees that some trees have fallen over. Amicia thinking what could have done this, but then we hear Leon has stopped barking. As we look around, we discover the boar, it has been eaten by something, with its guts spilling out and its head missing. Amicia starts to panic about what could have caused this and starts calling for Leon to come back. We can then hear Leon's whimper and we find Leon covered in blood with his bottom half down in a hole that has black vines or goo coming out of it. The ground then starts to rumble and Leon starts barking before something drags Leon underground. Robert stops Amicia from getting any closer, saying that they have to leave the area immediately. They head back to the village, and Robert says he's going to prepare a hunt to find out whatever caused that. He asks Amicia to find her mother, saying how he must speak with her immediately, and that she's probably with her brother. Here we can roam around town, and we can overhear 2 men talking, saying how the English have arrived in their part of France. They then start talking about a town nearby, and that the people are on edge, saying some were bitten during the night. The other man says it sounds a lot like the English, which the other man of reason says, why would the English do that? He replies, they are simply trying to keep them off balance. Like what? Sure, okay. But this was the Middle Ages and people did believe in a lot more crazy things. We continue on, going through the village, and we end up at a church. Amicia says a quick prayer for Leon before ending up at her house. Outside, we find Gabriella, one of our maids, and Amicia asks if her mother is upstairs. Gabriella replies that she is and spent the night there because her brother had another attack last night. Amicia thinks to herself that her mother won't be in a good mood before entering our home. Here we can head into the kitchen to find 2 maids talking. They say that there's a famine and a war going on, and in the town over, people are now getting bitten, and even the kids are not safe, saying that they now have to deal with vampires. I wonder if the vampire clan had anything to do with this, but probably not. We head up the spiraling stone staircase to reach the second floor. Amicia finds her mother, Beatrice, in her study. Beatrice says she's not supposed to be up here, but Amicia says that it's important. Amicia starts explaining that something in the forest killed Leon. Beatrice, annoyed, tells her that she doesn't have time for her stories. But they both then get interrupted by a herd of horses stampeding towards their home. Beatrice then looks out the window and quickly tells Amicia to stay here and to watch over her brother. Amicia asks what's going on, but Beatrice says to lock the door behind her and to not open the shutters for anything. Amicia then asks about her brother, and we learn his name is Hugo. Beatrice says that he's not contagious and to do as she says. Amicia agrees, and we find Hugo in his room. Amicia tells him that he's his sister and they haven't seen each other for a while, and that her mom will be back soon. Amicia, hearing voices outside in the courtyard, looks out the shutters and sees Robert has been captured by the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition was a powerful office within the Catholic Church to root out and punish heretics, and that went on for hundreds of years. We see the main leader, and his name is Nicholas, the soldiers if he had talked. The soldiers say he didn't, and that he actually killed 2 of their men. Nicholas asks Robert where the boy is, but Robert won't talk. Nicholas then proceeds to pull out his sword and slits Robert's throat, killing him on the spot. Amicia, seeing it all, is now in complete shock and shooken up. They then hear pounding at the door. Inquisition is trying to break into Hugo's room. Amicia calls Hugo over to come by her, and they start sneaking out of the house while the maids and servants are being questioned and killed right in front of them. We head down the stairs and make it to the back of the kitchen without being seen. Amicia opens the back door and a soldier is right there in front of them. Turning around, he asks what they think they're doing before Beatrice comes from behind, smashing his head in with a rock. Hugo runs towards her mother and gives her a big hug. Amicia asks what's happening, but she says they'll be fine, but they need to escape. Beatrice says to follow her, and we start sneaking through the garden, passing guards and using tall grass as cover. We can climb over walls, but we need to boost Hugo up since he is too small to do it for himself. We get to the next area, but here there are too many guards overlooking our direction. Amicia says she can distract the guards by throwing a rock at a crate full of armor. Why did they bring just a giant case of armor here? I'm not too sure, but that's pretty lucky for us. Beatrice tells her no, and that if she uses the sling, the guards will notice them. Amicia just says, well, I could just throw it. Beatrice says, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So using LB instead of LT, we can just throw rocks by hand without bringing up the sling. And RT again is to shoot. The guards hear a noise coming from the armor and they go to investigate, and we're able to slip by. Hugo starts to have another attack, and Amicia asks what's wrong with him. Beatrice says his disease is getting worse and they have got to hurry out of here. We continue through a garden, but a guard is blocking the way right in front of us, and there's a metal armor crate, but it's too far away and he's too close for us to bring out the sling. But there's a pot that we can use. These can be found throughout the levels and act as a distraction if there's no metal objects around. We can use RB, and this will open up our inventory that we can switch between items. We then use the pot to distract the guard, and we finally get to the exit of the garden, where a man has been waiting for us. Beatrice tells Hugo to run and hide, and we then see Nicholas on horseback racing towards them. Beatrice tells Amicia to take Hugo to find Laurentius, who's a doctor who helped Hugo in the past, and he will be able to take care of them. Amicia asks what about her, but she says she has to stay behind. Amicia, crying, tells her that they need her, but Beatrice tells them they don't, and to follow the river, and that will lead to Laurentius's farm, before shutting the door. Seconds later, a sword pierces through the door and is all covered in blood, assuming that our mother has just died. We find Hugo with no time to waste. They then race out of the forest with the Inquisitions on their backs, chucking spears as they try to chase us down and capture us. The ground then starts to rumble as we're running, and we can see some of the Inquisitioners getting sucked into the ground. Hugo and Amicia run until they find the river, but it's a dead end. Not wanting to get captured, Amicia and Hugo then jump into the river, carrying them downstream and completing chapter 1. Chapter 2 begins and Amicia and Hugo have washed up on shore. Amicia says there should be a village close by and that someone in the village can help us find Laurentius. Amicia turns around and Hugo is curled up in a ball. Amicia approaches Hugo and Hugo explains that their mother is going to be upset that he fell into the river. But Amicia tells him not to worry about that because, well, her mother is kind of a bloody Joe right about now. We follow a path that leads to the outskirt walls of the village. Upon inspecting the place, we see that there's no one here and it looks completely abandoned. We make our way inside the gate and we can see some smoke coming from further within the village. We make our way deeper and finally we're able to find some people. Amicia tries to ask them for help, but they quickly run inside and lock their doors. Amicia bangs on the doors to get some help, but they tell her just to go away. We then head deeper to the center of the village and we find houses with a giant white X on it. Hugo runs towards the door saying that someone has painted on them, but Amicia quickly stops him, explaining that someone inside that house has gone the plague, and the white X is to mark what house is infected. Amicia tells Hugo not to get close or to touch anything in this area, or else he might end up infected. We can see most of the houses in this area are marked with X, and that explains why the villagers won't help them. They are too scared to get close to anyone else. We get to the center of town, and Hugo smells something is cooking, and he wants some food. Well, something is most definitely cooking, but it's not food. We see a crowd gathered and find a woman tied to the stake. Next to her is another body that has been cooked to a crisp. The woman begs Amicia and Hugo for help, but a behemoth of a man tells the villagers that they are the ones who caused the plague, infecting the church and their kids by, I guess, playing music, he says? What's the logic behind that? Do I look like a fucking musician to you, sir? The mob is now in a rage, chases Amicia and Hugo throughout the village, hiding and distracting some guards before being found again and getting cornered in what appears to be a dead end. A convivial old woman named Clevie opens the doors for us, saving our lives. Clevie says they're safe here, and looking at the two of them, they're still drenched from the river, tells them there are some extra clothes that they can have upstairs. Changing outfits, Hugo tells Amicia they have to find their mom, but Amicia says that they have to find Laurentius first because that's what their mom ordered us to do. Hugo thinks this is a stupid idea and they're going to end up caught, and he takes off running. Amicia heads back downstairs and Clevie is glad that the clothes fit. She says that they belong to her grandchildren. But then Amicia asks what happened to this village, and Clevie explains that the plague came and many people have died. I'm sorry, that was my attempt at a French accent. I will not do that anymore throughout this entire video. Anyways, Clevie explains that the plague came and that many people have died. Amicia then asks about a doctor named Laurentius, and Clevie does say that a man did come to the church to do some hospice care when the plague first arrived, and that maybe the monks at the church can help them out. But Clevie also says that the monks haven't been seen for a long time and that no one goes to the church anymore because it was the first area to get hit by the plague. Amicia says that they have to go, but Clevie says that they will end up dying there if they go. But no one listens to old Clevie anymore. Clevie then sees Amicia has a sling, and that in the backyard there are some leather straps that she can use to improve her sling, and that she can use her workshop as well. Heading to the backyard, we end up grabbing the straps and go into the workshop. Here we can upgrade a few different items if we have enough material for them. Right now we can upgrade the strings to make the sling shoot faster, the pouch at the end of the sling to increase accuracy, pockets to carry more upgradable material, ammunition bag to carry more rocks, and attirail.
Paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia.
Wait, what? I don't know. Anyways, it's a French word for gear or equipment. This will make our gear lighter, so if we end up running, we won't be as noisy. Amicia thanks Clevie for her hospitality, but they then hear the guards again, and they have came back outside her house. Hugo, with infinite wisdom, just starts banging a wooden mallet for some reason. Like, Jesus Christ, Hugo, stop that! Amicia agrees and calls him stupid and tells him to knock it off before they end up getting killed. Hugo is now upset that he was called stupid and starts yelling and banging the mallet even louder, demanding to see his mother. Amicia is now pissed and tells Hugo that his mom is dead and he'll never see her again. Hugo says she's lying, but Amicia admits it's true, saying that she saw her killed at their house. Hugo, in doubt, calls her a liar and starts taking off running. Hugo is actually pretty lucky. He just got some mean words said to him and not a complete black eye. Amicia then chases Hugo through the village and ends up getting caught by a guard. Amicia pulls out her sling and tells the man to leave them alone. The man doesn't listen to her, and Amicia then sends a rock hurling towards his head, cracking his skull and killing the man dead. Amicia is shocked by just killing someone, but she had no other choice but to do it. Hugo calls Amicia again, and we make it to the outside of the church. The brute of the man who is leading the villagers to attack us has gotten a hold of Hugo. We shoot a rock at his helmet, but that has no effect on him. He then comes after us, and we learn we can dodge his attacks with B. We then find his armor can fall off if we hit the straps on his back. This holds all the armor together, and doing this enough times will make all of his armor fall off, including his helmet. We then shoot one more rock at his face, and that drops the man. Hugo comes out from hiding and gives Amicia a hug and thanks for saving him. But the other villagers are outside the gate and quickly start to climb over, trying to get them. But Amicia and Hugo quickly enter the church and barricades the door behind them, completing chapter 2. Chapter 3 begins, and we're now inside the church. Shooken up by the incident outside, Hugo lights some candles and says a prayer for her parents, while Amicia repents for killing the man. We then head up a ladder and we get to the courtyard. Looking down, we find a monk there, and Amicia begs him for help, but the monk tells them to leave immediately before heading inside. We then have to try to find a way down, so we enter the room next to us. The room is completely destroyed and is in shambles. Amicia wonders what happened here, and Hugo says they might just be making bigger beds. Amicia tells Hugo that's a fucking stupid idea, and we take the stairs down and enter the courtyard. In the courtyard, Hugo finds a flower and tells Amicia its name and facts about it. Since his mother deals with a lot of flowers to make Hugo's medicines, she probably taught Hugo about them as well. We then find the monk again, and he tells us once again to leave, but Amicia begs him to help, or at least to help Hugo. We learn that the monk's name is Thomas. Thomas then looks at Hugo and notices the crest on his necklace. He says that's the De Bruyne family coat of arms, and Amicia explains that they're Robert's children, and that they're looking for Laurentius. Thomas says that he does in fact know Laurentius, And he talked about taking care of their family and has even spoken about Hugo. Amicia explains that the Inquisition came and killed their parents, and Thomas can imagine what that was like, but says what's happening here is far worse, and once again tells them to leave. Amicia says that the villagers are outside the church trying to kill them, so leaving ain't really an option. Thomas then ponders trying to come up with a plan. Thomas then thinks of one, saying, well, that he can't leave the church, but says there's another exit through the crypt of the three saints, and that there still might be time for them to leave. Thomas then agrees to at least put them on the right path. Thomas looks inside, and the place seems calm for right now, so they head deeper inside the church. Thomas grabs a torch and tells the two of them to stay in the light and not to venture off. Amicia then asks about the X's on the houses inside the village, and Thomas says that the plague started with bites during the night and quickly spread throughout the town. But by the time they found out where it came from, it was already too late. Amicia asks where did it come from then, but they arrive at the crypt, and Thomas says Brother Morel should be here, so we notice Thomas has limp, so he hobbles around trying to find him. Thomas then hands Amicia the torch and tells him to stay here. He starts heading down the stairs, but Hugo suddenly has another attack. They all then hear a rumbling coming downstairs, and a gust of wind rushes through the crypt, blowing out all the candles. Then a swarm of rats rushes up the stairs, and Thomas quickly asks for the light as he tries to make it back to Amicia, but his hobble prevents him from reaching them in time and succumbs to the horde of rats eating him alive. The rats don't come near Amicia or Hugo, and we find out that the rats are afraid of the light. And staying inside a lit area, the rats won't come anywhere close. They start heading through the crypt, heading downstairs, while the rats attempt to attack them. We climb over some obstacles and solve some puzzles as we try to find our way out. The rats aren't able to climb very well, and I'm pretty sure that's wrong. I'm pretty sure rats can climb like really good. But anyways, in this game, going on higher ground will protect us from the rats, at least for a bit. We make it to a kitchen. There's no other light source besides from the fireplace, and we appear that we are now stuck. But dangling over the rats is a leg of meat. Amicia shoots the chains, dropping the meat on top of the rats, and they start devouring the piece of meat. We learn that when rats are feasting, they won't bother us as long as we keep a distance so we can get past. They finally arrive at the crypt, and we make our way inside. And inside, there appears to be this black goo of some kind. Turns out Amicia and Hugo have just walked into a nest. And this explains why there were so many rats that invaded the church first. We find a pathway out, and we can see the sunlight breaking through on the other side. They have made it to the exit, but as soon as they start to leave, rats start pouring out of the holes in the wall and cracks underneath. They dash to the exit, escaping just in time to complete Chapter 3. Chapter 4 starts, and Amicia and Hugo are now walking along a road. They find a windmill out in the distance, and that should be Laurentius's farm. Walking along, they then discover a body that has been half eaten, and it turns out it's a soldier from the Inquisition. They are now patrolling this area trying to find Hugo. Amicia and Hugo pussyfoot through the tall grass to avoid the guards. They eventually end up at a bridge, but the Inquisitioners have blocked it, and anyone wanting through has to get searched first. They find another way to cross the river by going through an old wood mill. We pass an orchard and a wheat field, and Hugo eventually has another attack. Amicia still doesn't know what to do when this happens, so she offers to carry Hugo. We then find a field full of dead pigs, and there's just so much blood that it started to create its own river from it. Night begins to fall, and the rats start exploding out of the ground. They quickly reach a light source as the rats start to devour the pile of pig. We then, I guess, find a cart. I don't know what you call this. Carrier, cart, I don't know. But it has a brazier filled with firewoods inside. Amicia lights the fire and the two begin to push the carrier. I don't know. Anyways, they push it all the way up, making it to Laurentius's farm. We get to the house, but the door is locked. Amicia sees an open window and sends Hugo through the window to unlock the door, and they head inside. They then hear some coughing upstairs and they go check it out. Inside our room, we find another boy and Laurentius, who is now bedridden with the plague. Amicia explains the situation to Laurentius, and he says that the Inquisition is after Hugo, saying that an ancient evil lurks within our family's veins. We learn that Beatrice and Laurentius were trying to create an elixir to slow the process down. He then tells Amicia she has to protect Hugo at all costs and to continue her mother's work on the elixir. Amicia is now angry, saying how is she supposed to do all this, but then gets interrupted by the rats making their way onto his farm. Laurentius says they have to disappear since the Inquisition will stop at nothing to get a hold of Hugo. He then says there's a shuttle by the river. We need to get to Chateau d'Umbridge. We learn the other boy's name is Lucas. Laurentius tells Lucas to get to the barn where his workshop is and to finish the ignifer. We make our way to the barn, but we see that ants have entered and blocked the path to the workshop. They then decide the best course of action is to move a bag full of wheat and lure a nearby pig into the barn. Hugo asks if they're gonna feed the pig, and Amicia's like, well, it's something like that, yeah.
Yes, dinner time, piggy. Yum yum.
Once the pig's inside, they shut the door, and there's a ladder next to the barn, so they get up to the upper level. Amicia starts extinguishing the light around the pig, and Hugo catches on to what she is doing. Hugo begs her to spare the pigs, but she says that there's no other way besides from, like grabbing a torch and just walking there, or starting a fire in the barn, or even grabbing some hay and making a torch from that. But no. The piggy must die. They enter the lab, and Lucas says Laurentius is a great alchemist, which alchemy was basically chemistry, but was mostly focused on converting base metal to gold and the creation of the elixir of life, as well as trying to transcend to their higher selves. Lucas then says to complete the ignifer that he's going to need alcohol and sulfur. He says that it should be somewhere in the workshop. Amicia finds the materials, and Lucas shows Amicia how to make the ignifer, which in Latin translates to bearing or containing fire, and it's used to light extinguished embers. We can also craft it if we have enough materials for it. The rats suddenly pour into the workshop, and Lucas says to light the fire in the middle of the room. It looks like a forge or something. Amicia throws the ignifer, and it lights up the entire room, and the rats scatter. They leave the barn, and as soon as they do, they hear a rumbling, and we can see that the rats have exploded from the basement of the house, knocking over ethanol stills, and the house just promptly explodes. Killing Laurentius. They now have to leave the overrun farm. Nearby, beside the house, was that horse, and it was hauling some hay. It hears the explosion and is startled and takes off running, with the hay inside the cart on fire. The horse clears a path, leaving the farm and dropping some of the flaming hay. We follow that path, and Amicia asks where it takes us. Lucas says this way leads to the river, uses her ignifer equipment to get across the field of rat, and they finally make it to the river, hopping onto a boat, completing chapter 4. Chapter 5 begins, and Lucas is paddling the boat, while Hugo sleeps in Amicia's arms. Amicia asks what courses through Hugo's veins, and Lucas explains that there's an old story that tells of a prima maculae, and in Latin, prima maculae means the first spot. This was the first corruption, and it traveled through the blood of certain families. But then the Great Break happened, and the maculae awoke. Amicia asks what that would do to Hugo, and Lucas says that maculae cares for nothing good or evil, and that it evolves with the host. And depending on who the host is, has the potential to change the world. And that's what Laurentius and Beatrice were trying to help with, and Amicia snaps back saying they have failed, but they arrived at their destination and Hugo wakes up. They decide the best course of option is to continue on foot, and in the distance we find the aqueduct. Following that will lead to Chateau d'Umbridge, which translates to Shade or Umbridge Castle. They follow the river, but making their way through, they start smelling a foul smell. They get to an open field and there are hundreds of bodies lying there dead from a battle that just took place. Amicia can't continue on seeing such a horrible sight, but Lucas says they must follow the aqueduct. They proceed to step on the dead bodies of the fallen warriors as they make it through the battlefield. On the way across, we see a dead horse lying on the ground, while its stomach is horrifically morphing in different shapes and sizes. They get closer to the horse and the rats explode from inside the horse's stomach. And then the rats start flooding the battlefield. We find more light sources around us, and using our ignifers, we make it across with little effort. Crossing a hill, we then see two thieves looting the battlefield, and when they see us, they quickly run off. We then find another cart with a brazier. Amicia and the boys push it to the end of the field, but then there's suddenly thick mud that stops the cart from going any further. Up ahead, there are some English soldiers on the other side of this wall, and they're looting the dead body. Across from us is another field of rats, but we don't have any fire to make it across. Hugo tells Amicia he sees a torch close to the English soldiers. Amicia tells the boys to wait here as she retrieves the torch. We follow closely behind the man with the light, moving silently, and we're finally able to grab the torch without them noticing. And here, we have to climb up, right? So we put the torch down to get up, but we can't bring the torch up with us. So we climb up, but then I got lost and I couldn't find out where to go. I then tried grabbing the torch from the ledge with no luck. And there appears to be no light sources up here, so I head down thinking that I missed something, but there's nothing in the other area either. I then see an ember that I can light on the other side of the path, but I need ignifer to do that, and I have no crafting material whatsoever. Looking around, there was no material that I could find to make an ignifer, so I just completely restarted the entire chapter. I, again, make my way back with ignifers this time and light the fire, but this still doesn't get rid of all the rats. I looked around and Hugo points out that there's bodies hanging from a tree that we can shoot. And I'm like, oh, I thought he was just talking in general. I didn't think it was actually something. We then shoot the ropes of the bodies, and that distracts the rats long enough so we can get past. And the other thing, it's just blended in so well with the environment, I didn't notice them either. And here's my issue. Why don't you pass the fucking torch up? Wouldn't it be smart to carry a few torches around with you the entire time? At no point in the game do any of them say, like, hey, you know what? They don't like light. So here's an idea. As crazy as it might be, why don't we carry around a few torches so we don't have to solve shitty puzzles all the time and pray to the gods that there's enough embers around that we can start other fires? Because what happens when there's no embers? Like, we're screwed. And before they get the torches, they resort to fucking alchemy before thinking a simple torch would do the trick. Like come on, the fucking caveman knew torches were great. Instead of trying to find alcohol and sulfur all the time, and then you have to carefully mix the two together to create light, when a stick with fire is 10 times better and more efficient. Anyways, that really kind of pissed me off. So we make it across and we find another pile of dead English soldiers. So we sneak past the men burying the bodies. One of the English soldiers have caught the two thieves. While distracted, we try to slip by them, but the rats tattle on us. You get it? Rats, plague's tale. The soldier turns around and the thieves knock the guards out. So everyone just starts running off, but the other soldiers see them running and start chasing everyone down. Hugo then trips on a log and Amicia tells Lucas to run while she goes and tries to get Hugo. We see a soldier grabbing Hugo by his arm and Amicia tries to save him, but a soldier comes from behind and knocks her out. And that completes chapter 5. Chapter 6 begins and Amicia is woken up by an English soldier. Amicia sees she's locked in a cage at an English camp. The soldier says they usually just kill grave robbers, but he saw her necklace and figured out who she was. Amicia demands to learn where her brother is, but he just says that the ransom is being paid for. Amicia, confused, asks by who, but the soldier just walks off and leaves her to be. The snakes who ratted us out come and unlock our cage. One of the robbers climbs up on top of the camp and the other robber waves us over. She tells us her name is Mealy and her brother's name is Arthur. Amicia tells her that she's a snake and that it's her fault that they got caught. Mealy tells us to keep our voice down and she starts leading us through the camp. Arthur on top will make the soldiers distracted when we tell him to do so, as Amicia and Mealy make their way to the far side of the encampment. They sneak past the guards, avoiding the patrols and empty wine bottles. We then find that Mealy can lockpick doors and chests if she's with us. And the English are really good guards and have the sixth sense if people are just too close to them. Like, oh, come on. Like, how did you did not know I was there. We continue on and we find Hugo is trapped in the cage as well. The guards are bugging Hugo, but another guard quickly runs up to the other men, telling them that the girl has escaped. They then set off to find her, and Hugo tells Amicia that the guards put the key inside the chest behind him. Mealy then uses her lockpicking skill and retrieves the key. Amicia gently lowers Hugo's cage and unlocks the door. Hugo embraces Amicia and tells him they are leaving. Mealy leads us to the end of the camp, killing a few guards along the way. We get to the exit, but as soon as we're about to leave, Nicholas and the Inquisition shows up and comes through the gate. Arthur then throws a giant explosive barrel like he's Donkey Kong, and we make a run for it. We kill a few guards and climb up a ladder. Mealy locks the door behind us, and we gotta get past one of the gates, killing more guards. We then find our exit, but the chain is too strong for Amicia's sling, so Mealy has to picklock it. Guards start swarming in, and Amicia has to hold them off until Mealy is done picklocking. A few moments later, she gets it unlocked, and Mealy and Hugo drop down first while Amicia follows suit. Amicia then falls on a pile of dead bodies, but before she can recover from the drop, archers position overhead and start firing at her. Amicia uses one of the bodies to cover herself from the arrows raining down. But Arthur uses another bomb to deal with the archers, and the group is finally able to make their escape, completing chapter 6. Chapter 7 begins, and we see that they have been running for a long time, as day has fallen to night. Amicia asks Mealy where they're going, and Mealy replies that they have got to hide for now, and that she knows a place to spend the night not too far from here. Amicia then asks Lucas, and Mealy replies saying he's waiting at Chateau d'Homme on Bridge. After Hugo and Amicia got caught, Lucas stumbled upon the thieves and told Mealy and Arthur where they can be found. They hurry along the path, and Mealy asks about why they are being chased by the Inquisition. Amicia just says it's complicated, and then Amicia asks about Arthur and if he'll be alright. Mealy replies that he'll be just fine and not to fall in love with him. Amicia, flustered, just replies no. We then end up at a watermill, and we use this to cross the river. We get to the other side, and we find the aqueduct. We then arrived at a torn down village, but Hugo has another attack, and Mealy asks if he had been bitten. But Amicia explains that it's something in the blood, not the plague. Mealy remarks that if it's in his blood, wouldn't it be in hers too? But Amicia just says she's fine, and we arrived at the hideout. Hugo asks if this is her house, and Millie replies that it's just a hideout. Amicia asks how long they have been living like this, and Millie says ever since their dad beat them one too many times, so they eventually just left for good. Millie then says how Amicia is like royalty, and Amicia asks what that is supposed to mean. They have lost everything, they got nothing to their names. Emily then, kinda upset, says who's going to pay us for saving them. Amicia is confused by this, and Emily explains that our maid Lucas said they were pretty rich, and if they were to rescue Amicia and Hugo, they would be rewarded greatly. They then just decide to wait for Arthur to have a proper discussion about the situation. They then head off to sleep, but shortly after, they're awakened by footsteps right above their hideout. They get up and head to a secret exit where we enter a cave. Amicia asks about Arthur again, Millie now concerned, saying he should have been here by now, but not to give up on it. Heading through the cave, a soldier is there waiting at the entrance, and he has a helmet on, so our sling is no good. Millie then tells Amicia how to make Devil Rantis, which is a compound of mixtures that when thrown will ignite, and the heat produced from it can melt steel by throwing it at the helmet. The soldier would then have to remove it, giving Amicia a clear shot to his head. So I guess it would be like jet fuel, but jet fuel doesn't burn that hot, guys. We then make it to the forest, and we sneak past the soldiers by taking some out and sneaking through bed of flowers. We then have to make it to the gate, and Millie says that that's their ticket out of here. Sneaking around, we arrive at the gate. They find a side door, and we then see Lucas being taken away by a guard. We eliminate the guard, saving Lucas, and they catch up for a second before moving on. Lucas then says that Chateau d'Umbridge is now not too far from here, but we find some rats blocking our path with no way across. Lucas then teaches Amicia how to make luminosa, which is an Italian word meaning bright. This we can just throw at any area and will make like a thermite type substance that will light an area for a few seconds before running out. Moving on, they get to the end of the aqueduct, but upon reaching the end, there is nothing there. It appears just to be a dead end, but Millie finds a secret door and they enter inside. They wind up at a giant cave system. Looking around, they then find a pontoon and they cross the water. Entering the door on the other side, find this like old rat trap system, and by lighting a fire, we can push the rats into the pit where they're able to cross and the rats aren't able to escape. We then find another door that leads to the outside, and we arrive on a cliffside, and across from them, we are able to see Chateau d'Umbridge. The old castle, which used to belong to the de Rune family, but is now completely abandoned. We try to make our way along the cliffs, but the rats are here blocking our path. But this time there is no fire source around. It appears that we're stuck once again. But then we find out that the rats are also afraid of the flashes from the lightning, and timing it perfectly, we can cross without getting eaten. We get to the castle entrance, but there's another pit filled with rats, so we have to find another way around. We stumble across a courtyard filled with rats. But here, there's a giant pit that we can use by lighting the fires and pushing all the rats into the hole. It seems that the de Rune family has had experience before dealing with the rats. How suspicious. We clear the courtyard and can finally enter the castle. They start a fire inside and head off to sleep before exploring the castle tomorrow morning. And that completes chapter 7. Chapter 8 starts on the next day. It looks like Amicia is having a nightmare, but Hugo wakes her up, noticing her distress. Hugo tells Amicia he has found a few things around the castle and that he wants to show him. Amicia follows Hugo around and we find Lucas is in the laboratory. Lucas says the lab is in bad shape, but it inspired him to start working, and he was up all night and has almost completed the great work. Lucas asks for some help completing it, and we find the items throughout the lab and hand them over. Lucas then mixes the components together, but it ends up failing. Amicia reassures him that he will get it right eventually. They continue exploring the castle and notice that Millie is now gone. Hugo is saddened that he couldn't say goodbye, but Amicia says she probably left early to try and find her brother. We head out to the courtyard, but Millie shows up behind us to our surprise. She says she needs to talk to us. Millie says that we'll do nicely for them, and if they don't draw attention to themselves, they'll be just fine here. Amicia asks if she's going to leave, and Millie says she's going to find Arthur. We learn that Arthur has been taken to the Bastion, basically means a heavily guarded fort, and that Millie is going to try and save him from there. Hugo then calls Amicia over and shows her the courtyard. We can see the platforms are in the shape of a symbol that looks similar to a drawing Hugo saw. Amicia asks what drawing he is talking about, and Hugo leads her back inside to the dining room. On the ground, find the same symbol. Amicia thinks it's an alchemy coat of arms. Hugo then asks if she has seen the tree yet, which she hadn't. They end up going to the tree, and Hugo starts to play with some butterflies, and this just shows how innocent he is and how much of a child he truly is. Amicia then takes off her necklace and places on the tree, and Hugo does the same. Hugo says that he's sorry for being sick, but Amicia reassures him that everything will be fine and will find a cure soon. Lucas joins them, and Amicia says that the maculae is growing faster, and you can now visibly see it in Hugo's veins. Lucas says that the maculae is spreading and that there are several thresholds and that Hugo is reaching the first one. Amicia asks how much time they have, and Lucas says very little. He explains that at each threshold, Hugo can die, but Beatrice and Lutonius were working on an elixir to slow that process down, giving Hugo more time to prepare. Amicia asks if he can create that elixir, but says he doesn't know how. But that knowledge could be found in a forbidden book called Sanguinis Aeternia, which translates to Voyages of the Blood. Amicia says if he had the book, would it be possible? But Lucas shuts her down, saying that the book is dangerous and that it's sealed away in the university basement, and that getting even to the university would be a suicide mission. Millie chimes in saying she knows the place and it's near where Arthur is being held, and if she comes along with her, she can help her get inside. Amicia tells Hugo that she's going to be leaving for a bit and to stay with Lucas at the castle. Before setting off, Lucas tells Amicia the Laurentius that told him once that they need to follow the path of roses and that will lead them to the book. They set off for town, completing chapter 8. Chapter 9 starts and we see Amicia and Millie have been traveling all day and have finally reached the city by night. We can see the citizens of the town are being evacuated for the blight has descended onto their town. Amicia says where the bite is, there's going to be rats, right? No, it's the Inquisition. Oh, okay, close enough, I guess. Millie picks the door to get inside the city, but Millie has to part ways to find her brother. She says the university is a giant building and that she won't be able to miss it. Amicia then asks if she'll ever get to see her again, and Millie replies that she hopes so. Amicia, now alone, has to make her way through the city, where guards are trying to get the rest of the citizens evacuated. She gets to the roof of one of the buildings, and from there, she can see the university. Amicia fights guards and sneaks her way through town. Amicia avoids the rats that have swarmed the city streets and are now infecting the town en masse. We extinguish some lights of the guards to feed the rats as a distraction so we can get by. We then end up at a courtyard and reach what appears to be like a gallows. Here, we see numerous bodies that have been hung, and we can use those bodies to distract the rats while we try to get across. There have been countless bodies eaten by the rats, and as we go underneath, we can see thousands of bones, and Amicia then steps into a bloody, sticky goo as she tries to get to the other side. We get closer to the university, but we have to cross the graveyard. Trying to open the gate, we find out it's locked. So Amicia then has to find another way around. We then see what looks like a candle spotlight I want to say. But we can use this to rotate the candle 360 degrees, and wherever the light shines, the rats will disperse, and we can cross safely. We climb through a building and out a window, and we get to the exit. Going outside, we found an archmaid who has been collecting a material called anguish. This material is created by the rats, however, and can only be harvested from their nests. A guard asks what this material does, and the archmage shows him by mixing zanguish with other components, we can create a mixture that when thrown will explode and will create a residue that will attract the rats to wherever it was thrown at. A guard asks the archmage, why don't our units use it then? And the archmage snaps back saying that it's too valuable to be wasted like that, and they need it for their special projects, especially in the base form, saying that this form has caused some regrettable accidents, and tells the soldier to take it to the bastion. Amicia overhears their entire conversation, and mixing the epizanguish with sulfur, she can recreate the odor. It's extremely useful in areas where we don't have any source of light, but need to get past the rats. The only downside of this effect is that the smell doesn't last for too long. Amicia then exits the graveyard, and we then enter part of the town that has been hit hardest by the plague. We find the guards have slaughtered the sick, and we come across a man who lies dying, and he says that the guards unleash the rats in this affected area to wipe out the rest of the sick. He begs Amicia to help him, but there's nothing she can do. We arrive at the university grounds and find a side door entering the university, completing chapter 9. We start off chapter 10 inside the university. Amicia remembers that Lucas told her to follow the roses. What these roses are, physically or metaphorically, we are not too sure yet. We explore around the university for a bit, but finally end up reaching a library. Looking around, it appears that most of the books have been taken. We go deeper inside the university, we can find some flags hanging that has the symbol of roses, so we must be on the right path. We enter a door, and I thought I found the archmage. I whip a rock at his head to try and take him out, but turns out he's just a standard enemy, and all of the archmages in this game look exactly like that guy. So I get punted, so instead of fighting, we just sneak past them. Overhearing another archmage, we find that the Inquisition is also looking for the book. They have taken all the books from the library and are now trying to find a book that has a red cover. We find more roses, so we're on the right path still. We make some of the rats eat the guards, and the one guard just can't be bothered that his friend is being eaten. It must have been a rough day. In the next room, we find more Inquisition, and they have captured a blacksmith and are leading him somewhere, so Amicia decides to follow them. We enter a room where a dead body has been tied up to a rack, and some sort of hose pump with a syringe is attached to his neck. We see a man pumping out his blood. He then loads the blood into a syringe and is about to inject it into a man, but the guards enter with the blacksmith. The man asks how the search for Hugo is going, and the mage says Nicholas is still trying to track Hugo down. Disappointed with the news, they have the next best option to find the book, and the only way to do that is with the blacksmith. We learn that the blacksmith and his father built a door that's impenetrable. Since he and his father built it, he should also be able to open it. The blacksmith says the door was to keep out scum like you. Enraged, we learn the man is the Grand Inquisitioner is Vitalis, and yells about how much pain he endures for the people. And the mage injects the man with a syringe full of the blood that contains anguish. Vitalis seems to get off by the injection like it's crack cocaine or something, and he then asks for the boy's name. He tells him his name is Roderick. They then take him away. Vitalis tells the guards to not make the same mistakes as they did with the father. We follow Roderick and the guards, and they lead us to a giant metal door engraved with what appears to be saints. One of the guards is heavily armored, trying to figure out how to deal with him, Amicia looks up and sees that there's a chandelier. She uses her sling and drops the heavy chandelier onto the guard, and Roderick kills the other one. Roderick thanks Amicia for the help, and Amicia says they need to leave now. Amicia then asks if he can open the door, and Roderick says he can, but it'll take some time. Amicia then defends Roderick while guards storm the room. A fire starts to quickly spread around the room from the chandelier that she dropped onto the guard. After a few minutes, Roderick opens the door and they start to run. They enter a cave system and run for a bit before entering another room. Roderick then barricades the door, giving them some time to explore. Roderick asks what's so special about this book, and we learn that his father was killed for it. Amicia says that it can help her brother out, and she needs to find it. Roderick says he doesn't quite know where it is, but they can try to find it. We then enter an old library, and on top of the second floor, we see a red book, and that has to be it. Roderick and Amicia then solve a few puzzles to get to the top. Why wouldn't you just climb up the bookshelf? Like, you would get up there in 5 seconds. Sure, the wood might be old, but I feel like it's better than spending 15 minutes trying to solve puzzles while the Inquisition is breathing down your neck. You know, whatever, I don't care. You know what? It's not even that high. Like, come on, Amicia. But this is the same girl who can't carry torches around, so I guess it does make sense. You then find the Sanguinis Itinerant. Upon dropping down, Vitalis arrives with his goons. Vitalis says he knows who Amicia is and has been watching their family for years, waiting for the maculae to grow in Hugo. He then asks what she plans for the book, and Amicia says it's going to save her brother. Vitalis replies that if he has the book and Hugo, he could save the world. Roderick then opens a secret apartment that has a crank, and it lowers a door down, separating them from the guards. Roderick has the ability just to snap people's necks. He's just a big brute. They make their way through the university, and we make it outside. Roderick then smells fire, and turning the corner, we see the building has caught fire from Amicia's big brain play from dropping the chandelier. Fun fact about this time, some buildings were made using stone and brick during this time period, but they were mostly for important or extremely expensive buildings such as churches or universities, while most of the other housing was made from wood and other combustible materials. Also, the buildings during this time were built very tightly together, so starting a fire like that, what Amicia did, would most likely destroy the entire town. And it wasn't an uncommon occurrence during this time either. Cooking houses and brewers were tightly regulated and were usually had to be built separately from other structures to prevent fires. During this time, there's no firefighters or anything like that. The best people could do was a bucket of water. So if a giant building like the university caught fire in your town, you're absolutely fucked. And the best option is just to run for your life. Good thing the people were already evacuating, but imagine getting hit by a plague and then your city burns down. Could you imagine that? Amicia and Roderick then run through the burning university and escape the city, completing chapter 10. Chapter 11 starts and Amicia and Roderick have made it back to Chateau d'Ambre. Hugo and Lucas have been waiting for their return, and Hugo gives Amicia a big hug. He then asks who this man is, and he introduces himself to the group. Amicia seems to be in a good mood for probably killing thousands of people that were still left inside the town, as well as the sick and dying who couldn't leave, and, well, burning down an entire city. Hope you feel very proud of yourself, Amicia. Amicia then gives the book to Lucas, and then 3 weeks pass. It's now December, and it's starting to get colder, and is now snowing. Roderick asks about this door, and Amicia says it's the only door they haven't gone through, and they haven't been able to get it open. Roderick, curious, decides to just break down the door. We find another door and a path to the side. They look at the hole in the wall, but decides it's too dangerous, so they inspect the door instead. Roderick breaks down this door and we just end up back at the courtyard. How anticlimactic. Our Roderick then shows Amicia a fresco. Now, a fresco is a painting that uses specific water-based paint on a freshly laid plaster. So when the paint dries, it is in the actual wall or ceiling or floor itself, along with the plaster. And some of the most famous artworks throughout history are fresco paintings. For instance, The Last Supper, made by Leonardo da Vinci, is one of them. And my favorite painting, The School of Athens, created by Raphael. Lucas then calls Amicia over to come quickly, and that Hugo is getting worse. Amicia runs inside and finds Hugo's condition getting worse. The macula is progressing too fast, and Lucas says he's trying his best, but doing it at their lab would be too slow and that he needs a better equipment. Amicia says maybe her mother had a lab back at their old place. Roderick then calls them outside, and heading out, we find Mealy is outside, that she saved her brother, Arthur. They came back to inform Amicia that during Arthur's imprisonment, he saw the Inquisition accompanying a prisoner, and they wanted her to tell them where her son was. Arthur overheard what her name was, and it turns out it was Beatrice, Amicia's mother. We learn that she is still alive, but is being tortured and kept as prisoner. Amicia is upset at Mealy saving her brother, but didn't help her mom out. Mealy says it would have been impossible to get her out, that the Inquisition was watching her like hawks. Amicia then tells everyone not to tell Hugo that his mother is still alive. Lucas replies that, well, maybe it could help out his condition, but Amicia snaps back with what's he gonna do when he wants to go find her, which, you know, is fair enough. But Hugo is up and overhears their conversation. We then hear Hugo scream and everyone rushes inside. Turns out Hugo's disease is progressing much sooner and he'll be at the first threshold soon. Amicia says they have to leave now and get to their old house to get the cure. Mealy, Arthur, and Roderick will stay with Hugo and will take care of him, while Amicia and Lucas travel to Amicia's home. And that completes chapter 11. Begin chapter 12 and we arrive back at our old house. Walking along the path, we see that the Inquisition is here as well, so they have to be careful. We then find a hole with a bunch of rats inside, and they're just running around in circle. They pay no attention to us or even try to get out. They just continuously run in a circle. Lucas says that it might be maybe some mating ritual, but Amicia starts to think that maybe these rats are not animals at all and are something else entirely. Lucas then says that there must be a reason for them doing that. And when I saw this, I thought it looked a lot like what's called an ant mill, or known as a death spiral. An ant mill is when a group of army ants are separated from their main foraging party, where they lose track of their pheromones and they will just start following one another. Since army ants are blind, they will just follow the scent of the ant in front of them. And if it just so happens to loop back, the ants will continuously rotate in a circle where the ants will march until they die of exhaustion. This looks the same as the ants, I thought. So the question is, did they lose track of their foraging party pheromones? Or maybe they lost track of their scent back to their main nests? It could be they lost track of the main rat leading this group, or it's just something else entirely. But that's what I thought when I first saw it. They make it back to Amicia's house, and there's a giant nest that covers the entire village. We see a body lying on the ground, and it turns out to be Amicia's father, Robert, with the rat nest forming around his body but not touching it. And it looks like the rats didn't even try eating him. All of a sudden there's a giant rumble and the rats swarm their position and form what I can only describe as a rat tornado. The rat tornado starts spiraling around and can knock out flames of the fire somehow. Even though there's still a light, the tornado then tries to approach us, but we can use the luminosa to dispel the rats, breaking the tornado. The rat tornadoes eventually stop, and they're able to move closer to the house. They make it inside, and hey, high five, friend. Going inside the house, even the maids' bodies the rats haven't touched, forming a nest around them as well, and not even eating them. Amicia and Lucas are confused by this event, but they continue on, making it up the stairs to get to Amicia's mother's study, but the potions here are not the ones they're looking for. They then enter Hugo's room, and we find that the rats haven't touched the room at all, and it looks exactly the same as when they left. Lucas starts to panic, saying that these aren't the potions either, and that there has to be a more complex elixir somewhere on this property, and asks Amicia if there's anywhere else she could have had a laboratory. Amicia says that her mother told him nothing, and Lucas asks if there's any place that she wasn't maybe able to go. Amicia says there are old Roman ruins nearby that she wasn't allowed into, so Lucas says that's where she must have hidden her lab. They leave the house and they make it back to the garden, which has been completely terraformed by the rat. We see a light in the distance, and Amicia says that's where the ruins are. They make their way through the garden, fighting tornadoes along the way. They find another fire cart, and Amicia tells Lucas to push the cart while she fights off the rats and the tornado. After a few tense moments, they make it to the ruins. They head inside. Lucas gets eaten by rats. Like, God damn it, Lucas, stay with me. We then find Roman sauditorium, which in Latin means sweat. It's basically an old school sweat room used by the ancient Romans. In the sauditorium, there are 4 symbols on the wall: the snake, the lion, the swan, and the frog. And doing some research on these symbols in alchemy, the most popular symbol for the snake is the Ouroboros, or the serpent that eats its own tail. And I think it's more widely known from the Norse mythology. The serpent continuously devours itself and then is reborn as itself. This symbol expresses the unity of all things material and spiritual in this world, which will never disappear but perpetually changes in an eternal cycle of destruction and recreation. This symbol represents infinity and the cycle of life and death. But the snake on the wall does not look like an Ouroboros, but just a serpent. So looking around, the snake symbol still represents transformation and renewal. But the key thing here is what Amicia says when she first sees the snake.
Snake. It gave me a few nightmares, that one.
She says how she had a few nightmares of them. And I would say, depending on when the dreams took place, this could point out future events in A Plague Tale 2. You see, the snake in dreams indicate a transformative process is already underway, or it calls attention to the need to move to a new level of consciousness. So that could mean that Amicia has begun developing the same maculae in her blood as the rest of her family did. And we know the family all had the maculae because the dead bodies of the families are left untouched by the rats. And we see them throughout our house before entering the bathhouse. So I would be surprised if Amicia didn't get some sort of power in the next game. The lion is the next symbol, and in alchemy is held at one of the highest regards. The lion represents gold, or the sun, and has the highest characteristics of ascension and enlightenment, along with the normal symbolism of a lion, which represents vitality, strength, and courage, and is seen as a protector of alchemy's secrets, as well as being a keeper of the underworld. The most famous lion symbol, which is a green lion devouring the sun. And here we're going to pause, and I'm going to try to explain just how complicated alchemy truly is. And I'll do my best to put it in layman's terms. The issue with alchemy is that trying to pin down what a symbol truly means when some people use different symbols for the same meaning. And 2, it's difficult because it represents both a physical side of alchemy as well as the spiritual side. Here is the best example I could find, explaining what alchemy truly is, or what it could mean. Here is the image of the green lion. Now this is a metaphor for chemistry called aqua regia, or called royal or regal water. This is a mixture between nitric acid, hydrochloric acid, mixed in a molar ratio of 1/3. It's a fuming liquid, and when it's first made, is colorless, but then it turns either yellow, orange, or red within a few seconds. And it's named royal water because it can dissolve metals like gold and platinum. Then on the symbolic side of the picture, the sun represents the ego of a person. The ego feels entitled and that everything else should revolve around it like the sun. Leo, the green lion, comes and devours the sun or ego of a person. The green lion represents our natural instincts within man. In this image, it shows the incentive primal forces within us devouring our own ego. See, humans fear our own instincts because we know just how dangerous they are. Civilization represses our natural instincts in exchange for peace and comfort. This is a positive event, but inwards it starts to weaken, and in humans' primal state lies a beast-like power that can lead us forward. This image shows the primordial essence, and that's why the lion is green, which represents a primordial color. Eating the sun symbolizes the dominance over the ego, and in instinctual forces is returning to a more natural state in which humans flourish. The sun or ego is terrified of being eaten or the death of oneself, and this can symbolize the death of an ego. Social conditions keep this instincts in check until the higher self emerges, and once released, our attitudes and feelings will be conditioned and directed by the regression of our animalistic nature. There is also a new sun rising, or our new ego, from the water, which is our new personality emerging. Water is a feminine symbol and is associated with unconsciousness or birth. So the new ego is being birthed by the death of our old ego from the water. The 7 red stars on the lion represents the 7 chakras, or the 7 inner metals to the alchemist, or even the 7 planets aligned with our ego, providing new material for the rebirth. The lion eventually turns into the red lion that is more fearsome but matured, and with the red lion's fullness of its power, new instincts take hold and becomes a libido, propelling the personality to higher heights and revealing undiscovered realms. And finally, the red lion will turn to gold as an old lion. The instincts are fully submitted in service of oneself, or when we become our true self. And that's the best I can do for alchemy. And this could be entirely incorrect when others have different meanings and the symbols are different for the green line. But this image, I just wanted to show how complex alchemy truly is. And if you don't understand it, well, it's not really needed. I just want to highlight the complexities of alchemy. The swan then symbolizes the first experience of the inner world or spiritual world, where they see it as being light filled from inner brightness or oneself, or is often mistaken for true illumination. Now, this is merely a first conscious encounter with the spiritual world, in which the souls of people appear to them as a bright white light. The swan is rarely ever seen flying and is mostly gracefully moving on the surface of the water. And our souls is the same way as a swimming swan, on a spiritual interface with the physical realm. The toad in alchemy was a lot harder to find anything on. They just tried to sell me this picture, like fuck off, let me learn, damn it. So the best I could find about the toad is that it represents prime matter, and alchemists would start off their experiments with the prime matter, which was boring, kind of ugly and basic, but would eventually transform into greatness. Think of the princess who kissed the frog and became a prince. Same concept. Whether this is true or not, I'm not too sure, so take this for what you will. And my god, that was a lot to cover. Anyways, inside the bathhouse is a giant painting as well. We see a pregnant woman that's beside an alembic, which is basically an old distiller. Lucas says she's an alchemist as well, and this is probably the place that they were looking for. Looking at the ground, we find a symbol being lit from underneath the ground. And here I wasn't too sure what the symbol was. It's hard to find different symbols online that aren't popular ones in alchemy that every 15-year-old girl wants just so she can be deeper with her friends. Like, get the fuck out of here, Jessica. There are a few I found that came pretty close, but aren't exactly the symbol. It could be the symbol for tin, which is represented by a few alchemy symbols, as well as alchemy signs. like the one used for Jupiter as an example. It could also be the symbol for borax, or it could be alkali. But the closest I found would be the symbol of spring, and that's it. It doesn't represent anything, not even the animals on the wall. But then after a long time, I finally found what this symbol is. It's the symbol for putrefaction, which online doesn't look like this at all. Like, as you can see, it doesn't have the fore shape, I hear you say. And well, I guess depending on what operating system you're running on, such as Windows, Android, or iOS, they will look completely different. But if we look at the Linux software, there it is. This took me so long to find, but my God, I finally did it. So I don't know how the devs got the symbol. By doing a quick Google search, you can find the proper symbol for it and not the Linux symbol. It's just so weird. Anyways, putrefaction is the process of decaying or rotting organic matter. Then on the platform, we find a hole that leads underneath the floor. We then have to light all the other fires, and the one symbol that doesn't light will lead us to the right path. But underneath is another colony of rats that we have to navigate. We light all the fires and we head back up to the surface. We can now see the other symbol is for sublimation, which is the transition of a substance from a solid phase to a gas phase without passing through a liquid phase. A good example of this would be dry ice. When it gets exposed to the air, it changes from a solid to the gas. And that's that fog you see forming around the dry ice. This S with a line through it is purification symbol, and in chemistry, it's the removal of unwanted impurities. And the last symbol is not shown, amalgamation. This is the action or process or result of combining or uniting different elements. And that ends up being the lion. Looking in the lion's mouth, we find a lever, and that opens a secret door. Opening up, we find Beatrice's laboratory. Lucas then ignites the lights in the room, and we find another old painting with a mother holding a child that has the maculae. We find out that the painting is at least 8 centuries old. Lucas says that this has happened before, and Amicia asks how many times this has happened then. Lucas doesn't know, but the maculae have been traveling throughout history, and that it changed the world before, and it will do so again. On the table, we find a chest that has a symbol of a phoenix on it. In alchemy, there are 5 birds used to symbolize the various stages of alchemy. The crow being the first, or sometimes a raven, but it's the beginning of a great work of soul alchemy. This stage is also described in alchemy texts as the blackening, and is often pictured as a death-like process, freeing of the physical senses. The second stage is the swan that we just talked about. It's the soul surfacing on the spiritual surface. This is when you experience the etheric body. And the third is the peacock stage, when an alchemist entered an astral world where they said the colors of the astral world appear as an ever-shifting patterns of color similar to a peacock's tail, or if you're Joe Rogan, a DMT experience. This gains an astral body consciousness, and this is the point of transformation. The fourth is a pelican, which uses its beak to eat an animal, and it nourishes its young with its own blood. This sacrificial relationship with one's inner self and must nourish his soul. This is the transformation stage where oneself must change, and it is a deeply painful experience which tests one's will. And the last and final word is the phoenix, which is the complete process of soul development. The phoenix builds its nest, and at the same time, a funeral pyre setting itself on fire and will arise anew from his ashes. The phoenix captures the alchemist's experience of spiritualization, that it no longer needs a physical body as a foundation for being. The phoenix, in this sense, has attained the Philosopher's Stone. One of the main goals in alchemy, the phoenix is the final stage of renewal and resurrection. The Philosopher's Stone is an unknown substance that was sought by alchemists for its ability to turn base metals into precious ones like gold or diamond. And they also believe that this substance, they could create the elixir of life with it. Some alchemists say that it was such a common material that a lot of people just ignored it because it was just everywhere, but it's now been lost to time. Speaking of that, looking inside the chest, we find Beatrice Magnum Opus. This was the cure for Hugo, but she ran out of time to complete it. And Lucas thinks that he can finish it here and now. Lucas then drops the elixir.
Oh shit!
And breaks the glass. Like, I'm just kidding, but he did break a glass. Like, god damn it, Lucas, you gotta be more careful. While Lucas is finishing the potion, rats swarm into the chamber. Amicia protects Lucas as he works on the potion, and Lucas needs us to find a stinky substance and bring it to him. We find it and hand it to Lucas as more rat tornadoes show up and we have to fight them off. Amicia then runs out of all of her equipment, but as soon as she says that, Lucas completes the elixir. The rats then completely stop moving or even trying to attack them. They decide to leave while they're not doing anything, and they just walk out with the rats not coming anywhere close to them, even without light. We learn that the elixir is linked to the rats, which means it's linked to the carrier as well. They head back to the castle, and Amicia gives the elixir to Hugo. Hugo is asked if he's cured, and well, they're not too sure, but he should be feeling better soon. Hugo then once again asks about his mom, and Amicia again says she won't be coming back. Hugo then asks if it hurts where she is, and Amicia promises it doesn't. But Hugo knows she's full of shit, and they head off to sleep, completing chapter 12. Chapter 13 starts the next day. Mealy, Arthur, and Hendrik enter the living quarters, waking up Amicia. Amicia then looks over, and Hugo is gone. She asks if anyone has seen him, and they haven't. They then spread out looking for Hugo, and Amicia ends up at the tree and sees Hugo's necklace is gone. Amicia then heads to the woods to find him, but falls into a ditch, hitting her head, and this completely knocks her out. She finally wakes up a bit later with her head throbbing in pain. She starts to make her way out of the ditch and find a village right in front of her, which she finds is odd, but enters the village anyways. She calls out if anyone has seen a boy, and the town folk shut their windows when she approaches. We then hear a familiar voice calling our name, and we follow it, and it's no other than Cleve, the old lady that helped us in chapter 2. Amicia asks if she has seen Hugo, but Cleve asks if she yelled at him again. Amicia reassures her that she didn't, and Cleve replies that times are hard enough without her yelling and arguing with him. Amicia says they weren't arguing, and Cleve says that no child ever runs away without a reason. Amicia demands her to open the door to let her pass. She agrees and gives her a warning, telling her to be careful as an ill wind is on the way. On the other side of the door is a path, and on each side has decaying pigs. Amicia questions what's going on now, and here's another familiar voice. It's Laurentius. He says he's been waiting for her and asks where Hugo is. Amicia says he's gone. Laurentius says he knew this would happen, but Amicia cries, saying that she did everything she could to protect him, even doing terrible things. Laurentius says, why did he leave then? And Amicia is not sure for the reason. Laurentius says that it's easy to spill blood, but to love and protect, and Amicia says she will get Hugo back. Laurentius then tells her to go while there's still time. Entering the next door, we hear Beatrice, and she's back from the dead. She calls Amicia to come over, and she proceeds. She says that Hugo is here, and Amicia asks how he is doing. Beatrice says if he's back here, then it's not going good. Amicia says she did everything she could, but Beatrice snaps back how she hid the truth from him, saying how she warned her about his emotions. Hugo doesn't want to see her, and Amicia says she has to see him. Beatrice reluctantly agrees, and we head into Hugo's room. We find Hugo there, and Amicia asks why he ran off. Hugo says that she lied to him about his mom, and Amicia says it was for his own good. Hugo does not buy that and says how she is just jealous, but Amicia reassures him that that's not true, and she attempts to grab Hugo, but Hugo pushes her away and it fades to black. We then wake up finding out that that was a dream sequence, and upon waking we hear Hugo's actual voice. We run and we find Hugo is in a cage captured by two men. Amicia kills the soldiers and saves Hugo. Amicia asks why he ran off, and Hugo says he thought he heard his mom, but Amicia says he can't hear her where she is and it must have been a nightmare. Hugo insists that he did hear his mom and that she was in pain. Amicia, not learning anything from the dream sequence, just lies again, saying how she's gone and can't feel pain anymore. They start walking back to the castle and Hugo hears the voice again. And strangely, Amicia hears the voice as well. Hugo runs off again and we chase after him. We end up back at our old house and Hugo runs inside a tunnel leading down that's covered in the rat substance in its nest. Amicia slows down deeper inside the tunnel when hundreds of bodies are fused together with that black goo that the rats produce, caking the entire tunnel with soldiers. Some of the soldiers dangling from the walls and ceilings are still alive, yelling how Amicia took their lives. Amicia tells the voices to shut up, and she will take their lives again if she has to protect Hugo. She passes the dead bodies, and we enter a bigger section now with dark clouds. The area is filled with thousands of rats. In the distance, we can see Hugo is talking to Nicholas. Amicia rushes towards Hugo, even though the rats will consume her. Her only goal is to protect Hugo now, at the cost of even her own life. She yells at Hugo to get away, but either he cannot hear her or he's going on his own free will. Amicia still tries to stop him, but the rats start to swarm her, covering her body as the screen turns to black. And that completes chapter 12. So let's pause and explain what this dream sequence was. The path follows along the story. We're at the first village that we made it to and we find Clary. If you remember, Hugo and Amicia got into a fight and Amicia called him stupid. Amicia tells Clary to move since she blocks the path, and at each door could represent her resolve strengthening to find Hugo. The same can be said at Laurentius' farm when she yelled at him again. Amicia is clearly upset that she yelled at him. Then we get to Amicia's mother, who is disappointed in her, and this represents how Amicia has failed with Hugo, but will correct her wrong and promises her mother she will find Hugo. We then find Hugo that is upset that Amicia lied, showing how she feels bad for lying as well. Might make Hugo resent her even more and maybe wouldn't want anything to do with her anymore. She then wakes up, but we're still in a dream. We find Hugo and save him, but Amicia repeats the same mistakes that she did the first time with Hugo, that she learned absolutely nothing because Hugo then runs off again. We enter a tunnel and we find the bodies inside. Amicia is troubled that she had to kill people, but she did it to protect Hugo, and if they won't leave her alone, she will do it again at the cost of her own morality. We enter the room with the rats, and Amicia doesn't have the light to cross, but she does so anyway, showing how she does not fear the rats and will sacrifice herself if she has to save Hugo from the Inquisition. So let's discuss this dream sequence. I find it just doesn't work for me. Amicia had done literally everything to protect him. Sure, she yelled at him, but you have to take into consideration the situation that they're in. There's a contagious, deadly plague where countless people are dying each and every day, and we're also seeing people get eaten alive by rats. And we have to kill people. That's a hard time for anyone in this circumstance, no matter who you are. So I feel like yelling at someone is the least bit of her problems. Does it help? Probably not, since he is just a kid, and I'm sure there's a better way to deal with it. But if I was in the situation, I'd probably yell at him too. If a kid wasn't listening and we could end up dead, then I feel like, well, is it really that bad? That yelling at him is the least bit of our concern. Then there is like the big lie that Amicia told. Hugo's mother was dead, but Hugo finds out she's alive. I think Amicia did think that her mom died until Arthur came back and told her that. If I was in this situation, I would either lie for right now and tell him later on when the situation is a lot less dire. Like if you look back at chapter 2, all Hugo did throughout that entire level was bitch that he couldn't see his mom. So if we told him she was alive and captured, Hugo would be carping the entire time until we went to either rescue her or he'd run away like Amicia was worried about. So I don't think Amicia really did anything wrong here with lying to Hugo. The story sets it up like it's this big betrayal, but I didn't think that. I thought she was more or less right. I would at least lie for a little bit until we could find a cure, and then afterwards, then I would maybe say that our mother is alive. But I would tell him sooner or later, but just not in this moment when we got everyone trying to kill us and he's dying. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think Amicia handled it right? Or am I completely wrong and she shouldn't have lied to begin with? Let me know down in the comments. Chapter 14 starts and we find Hugo is now with the Inquisition. We see an alchemist has taken blood from Hugo and Hugo asks that he wants to see his mom now. But the alchemist says only the Grand Inquisitor can talk to her. Hugo replies that he promised him he could, but he says that his words are not important and only the Grand Inquisitor words are true, but tells him that he's very important to Vitalis. He then leaves and locks the door. Hugo then sees a rat enter a cabinet and opening it leads to another room. What type of cabinet is this? What would you benefit from that? And there's no wall there, so someone clearly made sure to remove the wall just so the cabinet could reach the other room. How are you supposed to even reach in there? Like, how fucking stupid is that? Anyways, in a twist of the events, we get to play as Hugo now. Now, Hugo doesn't have any equipment or can attack. He can just sneak around since he's so small. Moving on, we hear some guards talking about how the conjuration is upon them. Hugo sneaks his way through the cathedral, crawling under tables and using steam as cover. We then enter the second floor and we hear an archbishop who represents the Pope, and he demands to see Vitalis. But the guards don't let him in, saying he's just too busy at the moment. Hugo has another attack, and these attacks have become more frequent. Hugo heads down the stairs, and we find Vitalis. A guard tells him that the Archbishop is here, and he tells him to bring him in. Vitalis asks how his trip was, and the bishop tells him to spare him his niceties, and that the church has grown tired of his games. Vitalis replies how his small games can change the world. The bishop says he has completely lost his mind, but they get interrupted by one of the mages. Vitalis tells the bishop to wait 1 second for this is important. The mage says they have Hugo's blood, but it's not at the first threshold yet, and that something is slowing down the process. Vitalis says it's not a big concern, saying if the books are correct, once Hugo does reach the first threshold, by injecting Hugo's blood in himself, he should also be able to reach it with him. They inject Hugo's blood into Vitalis, and the bishop is disgusted by the sight and calling him a heretic. And the Pope now sees him as a threat, and Vitalis is now excommunicated from the church. Vitalis laughs at the bishop, saying how a man can be excommunicated but not a saint. The bishop tells him his inquisition is over. Vitalis tells him a new era is approaching and puppets like him will kneel and beg for Vitalis to save him. Nicholas then walks in and approaches Vitalis. He tells him that he is with us. I'm not too sure what he is. Vitalis then says to go see if Beatrice is awake. Hugo, hearing about her mother, then follows Nicholas to the dungeon. But Nicholas shuts the door and Hugo has to make his way around. In the next room, we find a procedure taking place and a mage is explaining that the rats take the bones and flesh of its victims to build their nests. And at the rate that they are growing, all the nests will soon merge to form like a super nest. In the next room, we find some rats in a cage, but they are different from the regular rats. They appear to have no hair And Hugo says that he can't hear him like the others. Like, oh, okay. Nicholas stops at the cage and asks if she's ready to talk. With no answer, he leaves. The torturers will be ready soon. Hugo goes to the cell and finds his mom, Beatrice. She is shocked to see him there, and Hugo just says Amicia told him that she was dead. Beatrice is happy to see him though and embraces him, but tell him that he has to leave. Hugo refuses, and Beatrice sees that they have taken blood from Hugo and is now extremely concerned. Beatrice then tells Hugo they will leave together, but they need the key first, and the key should be in the next room over. Beatrice asks if Hugo can do this, and he agrees. Hugo then crawls into the room, and there are 2 guards here blocking the key, but we also find some rats in a cage. Hugo does some maneuvering and frees the rats, scaring off the guards. Hugo then retrieves the key and frees Beatrice from her cell. Hugo gives her a big hug, and Beatrice asks how his head is doing. Hugo tells her that he hears the voices all the time now. Beatrice asks what the voices say, and Hugo says that they want him to join them. This turns out to be the first threshold. Rats are now roaming outside the cell, and Beatrice says that they have no choice now, and that Hugo must reply to the voices. Hugo agrees and gives into the voices and embraces them. Hugo's headache suddenly vanishes, and we see that Hugo can now control the rats and can tell him where to go or whom to attack. Beatrice says that the voice was the maculae talking to him. Hugo scares off the guards, and he starts to laugh as he does it. But Beatrice tells him it's not a game, and what he has is extremely dangerous. Hugo then asks if this is the disease. Beatrice replies that he was never sick, and that it's more of a gift. So let's stop here for a second. Like, what? You told everyone in this game just how sick he was from the beginning up to this point, and told Amicia how sick he was to go find a doctor to help Hugo. And then they did all the stuff to find a book to make an elixir to cure him, but that wasn't a cure at all. It just kind of slowed it down. So I'm a bit confused as to why we needed the elixir in the first place. Like, if this was going to happen anyway, what was the point of slowing it down? The only reason that I can think of is that Beatrice wanted to make the elixir for Hugo to mature more, since he would probably be way too young to understand what his powers truly are. But we all thought Beatrice died, and if she actually did, no one would know about his power except for the Inquisition. Like, what would happen if Beatrice was dead? And we did all this stuff to make this cure, only for Hugo to end up at the first threshold anyways, just without Beatrice. We could have avoided a lot of trouble if we didn't even try to make the elixir in the first place, and we just ended up at the castle and we just hid there. Hugo wouldn't have been captured. Vitalis wouldn't have gotten his blood. Also, Amicia wouldn't have killed thousands of people for burning down the university. So I just don't understand what the elixir was for. Like, it makes no sense to me. And another thing that makes no fucking sense is when Beatrice finds those naked white rats, she asks what they did to them, and Hugo tells her that they have eaten human blood. And now doing that turns them into this other type of rat. Like, what? Rats have been eating and drinking human blood throughout the entire game. We've seen people get eaten by these rats, and none of them had the same effect. So I thought maybe I misheard him, that Hugo said that they were injected with something, but no, rats have eaten human blood. Not drank, but actually eaten. That's what he says.
What the hell did they do to them?
They make them eat people's blood.
Really?
Yes, it's strange.
We all know that the rats have the maculae, so they couldn't have given him the blood with the maculae inside, since we can control all the rats already. So they have the maculae, so I don't know what they did to them to make them change. Maybe someone else can explain it to me in the comments and tell me how I'm completely wrong. That's what I got. Like, it makes no sense. The elixir or the rats. I'm just completely confused about it. Anyways, Hugo's using his newfound power, make their way through the cathedral. We enter the main room, and guards shut the doors behind them, trapping them inside. Vitalis starts speaking about how they are reunited, and Beatrice yells that he got what he wants, so let him go. Vitalis says that he's a natural carrier of the maculae, and since it's only at the first threshold and there's still 6 more to go, he will not let them leave. Vitalis then asks Hugo if he feels it too, and says they are now bound by blood and that he's part of his family now. I don't think it works like that, but okay. Beatrice pleads with Vitalis to let him go and promises to help him if he does. Vitalis says that it's his destiny to be here by his side. Then they do the smartest play I have ever seen in this world. In the room, they release hundreds of rats. So Hugo then just uses the rats to devour the soldiers coming close to them. Like what was the plan here, guys? He uses his power, but Hugo exerts himself too much and weakens. Falling to his knees, the guards spill the epizanguis, which I think it is, into the pit, and the rats get lured back into the cage. Vitalis says he's not at the first threshold yet. What? Wasn't talking back to the rats the first threshold? Like, we can now control them and talk to them, but that's not the first threshold? So was he able to control the rats this entire time then, or what? Then another question is, what the hell are these thresholds? Like, I don't know what it is. Accepting the rats' voices would be that, but no, it's not. So I just don't know. Anyway, Hugo and Beatrice are then captured again, and that completes chapter 14. We start off chapter 15, and we're back with Amicia, and she has just woken up back at the castle after her little dream sequence. Lucas says she's been missing for a whole 3 days before being found. Amicia is upset that Hugo is gone and just wants to be left alone. 1 month passes and it's now January, it's snowing, cold, and it's almost night. So they have to light the fire so the rats can't get in. Lucas says he's going to make her some St. John's wort tea, and St. John's wort is a plant that can help stabilize moods and help with sleep. Oh, that's pretty cool. Amicia declines and then heads to the courtyard. Outside, we hear Mealy and Arthur fighting, and Mealy tells her that Arthur wants to leave, but he snaps back that he just wants them to be safe and, well, alive. Mealy heads inside, and Arthur and Amicia, they go around starting the fires in the braziers, so the rats won't be able to enter. They light all the fires and put them into position. Once they're done, there's a faint rumble, and the pit slowly starts to fill up with rats, but there are thousands of them. There's so many, in fact, it starts to overflow the pit, and they have seen nothing like this ever before. And the rat tornadoes have come back with a vengeance, and they start extinguishing the fires. Amicia fights the rat tornadoes, and she tries to get to the other side. She tells Arthur that there's only one other time that she saw the rats like this, and that was back at her old place. She barely gets to the other side alive, and Arthur and Amicia enters the castle. They get up to the fireplace, and we then hear the door break down, and the rats have gone inside. We then see someone coming up the stairs with the rats, and it's no other than Nicholas, and he's with Hugo, who I guess that his mind has been warped and now he's evil. Nicholas tells him what must be done, and Hugo approaches Amicia, but Roderick grabs her and they start to run off. Roderick barricades a door, and we enter the one door that we couldn't enter inside before. Roderick breaks down the door and the group runs inside. Amicia says she must talk to Hugo, but Roderick says they all just need to get out of here. They take that path in the wall that was too dangerous for us to explore when we first found it, but Mealy, Roderick, and Lucas make it through, but Nicholas then breaks down the door and gives Arthur a pimp smack, smashing his head into the wall, knocking him out. Nicholas captures Amicia, drags her down to Hugo. Nicholas tells Hugo to kill her or he will kill his mother instead. Amicia cries, trying to bring Hugo back to his senses, but it's no good. Hugo and Nicholas approach Amicia, and while she backs up, Hugo seems to still be hesitant about killing her. Nicholas keeps saying to kill her, and by doing that, he will cross the first threshold, but he still doesn't do it. Nicholas gets tired of waiting and pushes Hugo aside, and he is going to take care of Amicia himself. Amicia then calls him a bastard, but Nicholas reminds her that he gave himself up freely since she betrayed her, and that Vitalis will now be the only sole carrier of the Maculite. Amicia yells that Hugo is the only carrier, but Nicholas says that, well, he's not anymore. Amicia trips and falls to the ground, and Nicholas about to finish her off, but then we see Arthur on top knocking down a scaffolding that has giant boulders on it, crushing Nicholas. Arthur comes down and Amicia tells him to make sure that that man's dead while he goes to talk to Hugo. Arthur agrees, and Amicia then tries talking to Hugo, but he doesn't say anything. Amicia tells that Nicholas is dead and he can't hurt him anymore, but he just slowly starts to raise his hands, saying that she lied to him about her mother, but Amicia tells him she was only trying to protect him. He then raises his hands even more to form a rat tornado. But before it can reach her, Amicia rushes to Hugo as they both get swarmed by the rat. We then see the rats disperse and the two of them are safe. Amicia says that he passed the first threshold. Like, what is this threshold? Like, I thought it was maybe killing his sister, but no, it's just maybe true love or something. I don't know what it is. But anyways, he passed the first threshold. He did it. They hug, and Hugo then sees behind Arthur that Nicholas is getting up and he's not dead. He then stabs Arthur in the back, killing him dead. Now, Arthur, what the fuck were you doing? You were supposed to make sure he was dead. You checked. What the hell happened? Like, why didn't you do it? Okay, here's a tip, everyone. This is #1 tip, all right? People, if you're in a situation like this, always make sure that they're either dead or you double tap that motherfucker, because that is going to save your life. Here's a clear example of why double tapping is so good. Amicia and Hugo then have to fight Nicholas, and Hugo uses his powers and makes the rat devour him. But he's a pretty tough guy and gets back up, and he lights his entire hand and sword on fire. So what we have to do is extinguish it and let some more rats into the arena, and we rinse and repeat. We do it 3 times, and Nicholas finally dies, being eaten by the swarm of rats. Mealy, Hendrik, and Lucas rush to Amicia, and Mealy finds Arthur's body. She is rightfully upset and goes just on a tirade, saying how she is going to kill all the Inquisition. Hendrik says she wouldn't be able to even reach them, but Amicia agrees with Mealy that they actually need to be stopped. Hendrik and Lucas call them nuts, but Amicia points out that they now have the maculae on their side. Amicia asks what Hugo wants, and he replies that he wants to save his mom. So the 5 of them agree to the suicide mission to head to the town to put an end to the Inquisition. They put their hands together, saying to the death, and they head off to the cathedral, completing chapter 15. Chapter 16 starts, and the gang have reached the outer city walls. The place is a lot more dark and gloomy from the first time we were here. We tried going through the same door as the first time, but the rats have completely blocked it off. Mealy is pissed about that and tells them that they got to try going through the great door. Hugo asks if she's mad at him, but the others just say to give her some time. The group starts sneaking their way through, but guards are blocking the gate. Mealy says that they're better off just using the back door on the other side, but Amicia says it's probably locked. But soon a bell rings and the guards are distracted. So Mealy and Lucas head to the other side and try picklocking the door before the guards turn around. Unfortunately, the guards see them before unlocking the door and they start to chase them. Mealy gets the door open though, and she and Lucas start running away with the guards in pursuit. The others take this chance to enter the city. They start making way through their town, and Hugo's powers makes it a lot easier to get through the guards. We get through most of the city and we free some townspeople being held captive. After saving them, the men bless us and say good luck to them before running off. They start to run, but on the other side, a group of archers have taken positions on the roof and just snipes them down. Should have probably kept the prayers and good luck to yourself. We then see this armored cart on the road. Amicia says her and Roderick will push and Hugo will be protected on the other side. But Roderick then just pushes Amicia out of the way and tells her he is going to do it himself. So Amicia and Hugo stay behind the cart as Roderick pushes in. Amicia fights off the guards as he pushes, but ends up still taking an arrow to the shoulder. We get to the other side. Amicia is worried for Roderick, but he says he's fine. We then see Mealy and Lucas on the other side of the gate, and Roderick then lifts the gate and Amicia and Hugo crawl underneath. And when it's Roderick's turn, he drops the gate and falls to his knees. Hugo through the gate touches Roderick's head, and Roderick tells Hugo that he's sorry before dying to his wounds. And I know this is supposed to be a sad and touching event, but what is that face? What is that? It kind of got to me. I'm sorry, it's sad, I know, but look at that face. That's meme material right there. Amicia tells them they have to leave him behind, and the group is saddened by his death, but they have to push forward. Mealy, upset, kicks the barrel down, and they all just tell her to calm down. They move on, and the road is covered in rats. Mealy is now getting sick of all these rats, but Hugo says they'll let them pass. Mealy replies how, and Hugo just raises his arms, and the rats disperse to each side, forming a path through. They have reached the cathedral. The entire cathedral is now covered in that rat goo and is probably a super nest of some kind. Soldiers exit the building, and Amicia warns if they come down, they will surely die. The soldiers don't seem to care and start approaching. Hugo then makes the rat explode from the ground in such vast numbers and easily devours the soldiers. They enter the church and barricade the door behind them. Entering the main hall, Vitalis is there talking to Beatrice that's locked in a cage. Hugo calls to his mom, and looking around the seats of the cathedral, we see hundreds of bodies that have been eaten to the bone, and we learn that Vitalis has sacrificed all of them. Beatrice warns them that Vitalis has passed the first threshold as well and tells them to leave. Beatrice then gets lifted from the ground. Hugo tells Amicia that the rats are here and he's ready for a fight. Hugo then makes thousands of rats appear as they approach Vitalis. Once they get close to Vitalis, he then makes his own army of white rats appear. These naked rats are somehow not afraid or affected by the fire. And once again, how does the rats eating human blood make them not afraid of the fire? Like what? I still don't know. Anyways, the black rats are still afraid of the fire and they have to fall back. Amicia tells Lucas and Mealy just to stay here as they deal with him. The rats are now clashing together and Amicia puts out the fire so the black rats can advance. Vitalis then creates his white rat tornadoes and sends them at us. Hugo creates his own, and what I can only describe as a rat tornado fight starts. Anytime white rat tornadoes come, we use the black rats tornadoes to dispel them back. The black rats keep advancing with Amicia, and the white rats retreat back to Vitalis. We then reach Beatrice. Mealy and Lucas have reached the top of the cathedral, and they lower herself down to the ground. They free Beatrice, and Vitalis then asks Hugo if he can feel the power before being swarmed by his own rats, creating a super massive rat tornado. He then uses it to try and slam Amicia down, so we have to run and avoid the tornado. And after a few times, we can then ask Hugo to send his rats to attack Vitalis. Once the rats attack, they dispel the white rats around his body, and Amicia then can use her sling to whack this 80-year-old in the face. This eccentric man, though, takes more rocks to the face than the biggest, youngest soldiers we face the entire way here. But finally, after a few times, eventually Vitalis then falls to the ground, bleeding and covered in blood. Vitalis looks at Hugo just before dying, and we see that Hugo has no emotions on his face when he's looking at the corpse of Vitalis. This shows how Hugo is not the same boy from the beginning of the game, or it could be the macula affecting him as well. Either way, he seems to feel nothing. We then get an abrupt credit sequence, which I thought was a bit weird. Like that's it? We watch a bit of the credits before the end. Oh, And what's this? Oh, there's one more chapter. We then start the final chapter, chapter 17. It starts 3 days later, and we see Amicia and Hugo in a small village. They were sent by Lucas to pick up some ingredients. They stop at the market to get the ingredients, and Hugo asks if their mother will be better now. Amicia says she's going to be just fine, and that she's pretty tough. And after spending a few months being tortured, I can only imagine she'll need quite a bit of time for rest. We then overhear the villagers saying that they're finally able to return to their homes and that the rats' nests are still there, but there's no more rats in sight. We then find a fair game, and we then can use the sling to try to shoot 6 wooden rats. If we hit all 6 rats, we get an apple. Amicia makes short work of this game, and Amicia wins and hands the apple over to Hugo. The carney then says that there's a fair down the street, and they're celebrating 3 days without the rats. And okay, I feel like it might be a little bit too soon to celebrate. Like, it's only been 3 days and the towns are calling it all clear. Like, I wouldn't feel safe, like, going out. If I was the Lord, I would probably give it a month or two before doing anything like a carnival or parties, right? Like, the plague is still around, people. Jeez. Hugo then reaches the carnival, but the guards won't let Hugo in. Amicia asks what's the problem here, and the guards explain that he is not welcome here since he and her sister are wanted by important people. Who these important people are, I don't know. The Inquisition, at least Vitalis's group, is gone, and the Pope ain't after them because we dealt with Vitalis, so who's chasing us now? Like, we don't know. They just don't want any trouble, and Amicia seems that pretty reasonable. He tells Hugo that they just need to move on, and Hugo upset by not being able to see the fair, but Amicia then tries to cheer him up by having a race back to the cart. Hugo gets a head start, and you cannot win this race. Trust me, I tried quite a bit. Lucas asks if she got everything he asked for, and she says he did. Hugo then asks why the townspeople were looking at him like that, and that Mealy looked the same way before leaving. Amicia says that she had other things to take care of, but the townspeople are probably afraid of Hugo knowing what type of power he has. They set off in the cart, and that completes A Plague's Tale. So, in conclusion, I thought this game was pretty good. The gameplay did leave, I think, a lot to be desired. I really wish they focused more on the puzzles, if you would even call them puzzles, and just making them like a lot harder or more unique, I think would have helped the game out. And even I think a more of a survival aspect would have really benefited the game, because I just found it's just super easy. Like, the rats really don't pose a threat to you, and like, as long as you're in the light, they don't really come after you or do anything. So I wish there was more unique ways they implemented the rats, and combat was a bit frustrating at times, but I found it just to be pretty basic. And these are all things that I hope they fix in the sequel coming out pretty soon. The story I love. It's a great concept, and you don't really see too many about the plague. I love the idea, but the execution was kind of a miss, I found. The character development feels rushed, especially for like Roderick, Mealy, and Arthur. Like, they all really just met Amicia, but they act like they've been together for years. And when it came to their deaths, like Arthur and Roderick's, I really didn't feel much of anything at all. Roderick's death I thought was more funny than anything, just because of his face. So I really wish they took some of the characters and slowed them a lot down so we could develop more feelings towards them. And while writing this, like, I forgot Roderick's name so many times that I mostly just called him Hendrik before I went back to change what his name actually was. He was just that forgettable to me. And I do think the story does have a few holes, like how do the white rats that drink human blood are now not affected by the fire, or that Hugo can't control them? The rats have been eating people throughout this entire game, and I'm sure some of them are bound to drink some human blood, so I don't get that. And when Amicia lies to Hugo, I thought it was completely justifiable, but they make it out as this big betrayal. And then there's the great elixir. Like, what did that do? Like, really? Like, we find out that the potion really doesn't do anything. So what's the point of going through all these levels and having all the sacrifices just for it to be nothing? Just feels super weird to me. And then another thing I noticed is when Amicia is at her old house with Lucas, the rats form those rat tornadoes. And the only time we see them do that is when someone's controlling them. Hugo hasn't gotten that ability yet, or Vitalis. So who was attacking us there? You know, it's kind of a mystery. So I'm hoping that they kind of explain it in the second story. Then there's Beatrice telling everyone about Hugo's sickness, other than Amicia's father, Robert. I get not telling Hugo about it, but why wouldn't she tell Amicia, who has to take care of him if she dies, right? They say it was to protect her. Like, what did she really get protecting from? The Inquisition was still chasing her down anyway. So what protection did we really get? When the Inquisition first arrived at our house, I think Beatrice should have told Amicia that Hugo doesn't have a disease, but a power, and that's why you need to protect him. And you don't have to say what that power is, but say something along those lines, so at least Amicia kind of knows what to prepare for. And like, what happened if Beatrice actually died at the start of the game? Like, they would never find out about his powers, but they would do all this questing to get the great elixir only for it to fail anyways. But I did love the alchemy side of the story. I just wish there was a lot more of it, because alchemy is one of those really weird, fascinating things, and I just love it. But overall, I did enjoy the story. But tell me what you think in the comments. You think I'm wrong about any aspects? Do you love the game? Do you hate the game? What's your favorite level? Tell me anything or everything about it. I love to read the comments and find out what you guys think. A Plague Tale 2 comes out in October, so hopefully we get some more answers. But hopefully you guys enjoyed game recap. And just before I leave, I do have other Game Explained videos up, so if you want to check them out, feel free to do so. I think they turned out pretty good. And with that, once again, if you guys liked the video, drop a like. And if you really like the video, drop a sub. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.